And we're currently live. So, hello everyone. Welcome to another great episode of Late Night with Chefs. Truffle Boy and Doug here reporting for duty. And we have a wonderful guest, Chef Yazzie, in the house tonight. How are you doing, Chef? Awesome. That's great to hear. Say hi to all our viewers tuning in. Awesome. Let's get this podcast going. So, Chef Yazi, we're really interested in your background story and how you got into food and what your passion is. But if you can kind of run us about your background experience and background in general. If you want to start, you can start as early or as far into your career as you'd like. But if you can give us that introduction and what drove you to be a chef and be so passionate about food and this industry.
And there we are when we're at a table surrounded by food. That is our community, that is our unity as human beings, regardless where we are from. So that was what was taught to me by my mom at an early age. So and moving on into grade school, into high school,
So
I did a lot of outdoor cooking. Yeah.
yeah. So when you were younger, that was kind of like your, contribution to the family at that like 6 or 7 year mark. Did your siblings have as much interest in the kitchen, or was that kind of like you and your mom's thing?
Yeah, definitely. My older brothers, everyone, even my stepbrothers, everyone in the household knew how to cook. It was coming from my grandma. It was coming from our parents.
Right.
Regardless what gender you are, as indigenous people, as tribal communities, we're always taught to cook at a young age. And that's a full circle where we're teaching our younger siblings how to cook as well. So yeah, it was
A
around that
family
time is when
affair.
around that time I found the term cooking saved my life. When I share these stories with the native kids, or with the youth in general that are trying to help to bring awareness with going from negative to positive lifestyle. So into my adolescent years, I kind of went off course I went through 4 different high school on and off the reservation, and I went through a couple of detention centers on and off the reservation as well. So all through high school, going from, I think sophomore is the highest ever went to in the actual high school setting. So I went through the positive lifestyle to a negative lifestyle, meaning I got introduced to a environment of gang activities, stealing
Right.
cars, chop shop, car stereos. So I was shot
And
at,
would you
getting
say,
and at that.
yeah, would you say that environment is, indicative of the area that you were in, or just, the sort of, status quo?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was the cultural shock.
Yeah,
Getting kicked out of reservation high school or school system is totally different from off reservation life. So growing up on the reservation and moving to Phoenix, Arizona, or Glendale, Arizona, the west side of Phoenix, and being introduced to the inner city culture was different for me. So I had to pick a neighborhood. I had to pick a color, because that was the neighborhood that I was in that type
yeah,
of environment, and so picking up that lifestyle. And I remember being gone from home days at a time, ending up in county jails and doing whatever. And I remember getting a call from one of my sisters, every other week or so. They would give me a call and say, we miss your cooking. Why don't you come home for a couple of days? This was before a prep meal was popular, right? So we do
right,
all these type of meals, and we go in the fridge or freezer, right? So they'd have meals throughout the week, and that was their way of checking on me. So today when I share the story, it's cooking saved my life. Having my
yeah,
siblings and my mom, and also my wife right now as well. Giving me the ultimatum, being in a serious relationship or moving on.
right,
So yeah. So I probably say about mid 20s, about 25. I received my high school diploma. I was homeschooled. And my wife actually, she actually helped me, looking at the guidelines and the syllabus. And to me, it was a reintroduction to education, right? So, but besides that, I worked in a couple of restaurants, mainly a lot of Asian restaurants, in Phoenix, Arizona, in areas where, with the record that I had back then, they weren't able to hire someone like me. So I was
right,
mainly working in areas that are more, back then they would call it underground cooking. So it was more, getting paid out the back door, right? Just doing cutting up a couple of vegetables or a couple of chicken breasts, right? And then getting paid out the back door. So usually that's how I was. Then a lot of labor ready work as well,
yeah,
So, but it wasn't until when I received my high school diploma, my wife and I moved to Casper, Wyoming for about a year. Her uncle with her family, he hired me as a carpenter, as a rod buster, labor work. So I learned that type of skill set for about a year. Working in Wyoming, building foundations for buildings, and the money was good, of course, but it wasn't the passion that I had. It was just a
right,
paycheck.
right,
So when that work was over, the seasonal work, we had that conversation of moving back to the reservation or starting a new life somewhere else, right? Because the area that we live in on the reservation, the nearest education, the nearest community college or tribal college would be about an hour to hour and a half away. So not having that type of resource or vehicle to transport, we have to look at other resources to kind of
yeah.
better ourselves and our lives.
So you're
So we
about
ended
like
up
27, 28 when you're thinking
about
about making
25.
this 25,
Yeah,
and you're
25. Yeah.
gonna make this, giant step from finally trying to pursue that passion that you've sort of been, chasing in your younger years.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah,
That's cool.
25. And my wife and I, we moved to Shakopee, Minnesota, 2012. And it was moving in with her brother and his in-laws,
Okay.
and he's married into Dakota family here in Minnesota. So that was our introduction to moving to Minnesota in the Midwest. We took a Greyhound from Casper, Wyoming, one-way trip, a couple of duffel bags, and we end up here about 12 years ago. Yeah, 7 years ago. Sorry. So, so doing that, it was really interesting because I didn't know anything about indigenous food. I didn't know anything about organic food or anything of edible landscape or farm to table, whatever trends or fads that are used right now. I didn't know anything about that.
Right.
So to me, it was just outdoor cooking. Putting a steak or a couple of sausages on the grill, right? So that was my way of cooking. But it wasn't until 2013 where my wife, she enrolled to a local community school called St. Paul College. And, she was encouraging me, the college, the campus, they have a culinary school. Why don't you go to school and get paid for something you like to do? And that definitely makes sense,
Yeah.
because again, I was looking at the money, and I was looking into pharmacy technician. It was good money, but she was laughing at me like, no, you should not take that route, and to you, it'll be just paycheck to paycheck.
Right. Like
so,
how you were doing
so
the other work. Yeah.
yeah. And the way it all came together was interesting because a couple of days later, I received a brochure in the mail, and it was from St. Paul College on Culinary Arts. And I remember looking at the shiny appliances, the fresh produce, the seafood, and they just had a new 1.5 million renovation of their culinary lab.
Oh
So I
wow.
went to their open house, and back then, I compared Le Cordon Bleu when they were still open and into St. Paul College. I compared the tuition, the academic, they were the same. And I was able to afford St. Paul College, and it was
Yeah.
the same type of certification, a 2.5 year program for an AAS degree. So I
Yeah.
ended up going with St. Paul
Yeah.
College.
That's
And
exactly where me and Vlad actually ended up meeting is,
Yep.
a local community college.
yeah,
To those people that, have the resources and the ability to go to, Johnson and Wales and CIA and Le Cordon Bleu, the more power to them. But I think it's important if you are that professional cook and you want to go to that next step, and it's really important to put yourself out there. And it's not about having the piece of paper, it's about showing that you have that dedication to put yourself through those courses for this art. I think
definitely.
that's a
100%.
really, really good move. You probably could have, gone that route, but you wanted more, you wanted to be able to do more, you wanted to provide. And that's really cool that you were able to, make that happen in a new place, a
Yeah.
new surrounding.
Yeah. And I have to be careful with that, going into the education system and the amount of loans I would receive, and what's going to be shadowed over me for years to come, So I was looking at those different opportunities, and to me, St. Paul College, a community college, was fit for me because they actually work with the local farms and the local chefs, and they do internships or stages or whatever into local restaurants, fine dining or
Nice.
whatever, soup kitchen, whatever avenue you want to take as an aspiring chef, So, and that's the reason why I took that as well, because they were focused more on community instead of media or international presence, right? So
Right.
it was more local. So, and my first semester, a couple of peers, a couple of colleagues, we had a little challenge, so we gained some points at the end of the semester, some extra points from our instructors, and the challenge was to pick one dish from one cuisine, throughout the world, whatever cuisine it is, Italian, Japanese, French, whatever it is, Mexican, whatever it is. So I was looking at Mexican cuisine, I was looking at Japanese, I was looking at Southern cooking, right? And all the outdoor cooking, I was all into that stuff. And
Yeah.
I remember looking at Sean Brock's one of his older cookbooks, and he had he had grits, he had Johnny Cakes, he had all these different
Yeah.
stuff. But the focus of it was maize, it was corn,
Yeah.
and I started looking at these different cuisines, these different textbooks and cookbooks we had in our lab, and I realized that there's something I echoed that a lot of indigenous cooks and chefs have been echoing, is that for me, that's what blew my mind, is looking at these different cuisines and realizing that not only have my ancestors survived manifest destiny or colonization, but so have the ingredients from the Americas. You want to have
Yeah.
Mediterranean spices or Chinese chilies or spices within the Asian community without having it coming from Central America. You want to have corned beef and
Right.
squash in Italian or French cuisine without it coming from Central America, or the Americas.
Yeah.
So looking into that, that small bit of information blew my mind, and I started focusing on not just my Navajo food culture, but the food culture across the board, across the Americas, and looking at what was here before Spaniard and European contact, looking beyond dairy, gluten, looking beyond processed sugar, looking at the local, the natural sweeteners, looking at the local, for example, looking at a local lake in Minnesota, so a mile radius around that lake, what type of ingredients would you find? Possibly sunchokes, wild onions, duck, rabbit, hyssop, bergamot,
Yeah.
sweetgrass, cedar, all these spices and herbs you can use, right? So wild carrots in some areas, mushrooms. So just looking at locally and then expanding is the way I found my passion or my path for cooking, and specifically for indigenous food. So when I found out, and I felt like, okay, I found something that I might be able to cover, and one of my instructors, who's one of my mentors now, um, um, he encouraged me to keep focusing on native food. He also
Yeah.
encouraged me to challenge the culinary setting of using, instead of using farm walleye, reach out to the local tribal communities who actually have the real fresh caught walleye or fish,
Right.
and looking at the real tribal communities who hand harvest and sell wild rice instead of purchasing it from farms in California or Florida or Canada.
Right.
So
Right.
I started. I think that was my part of starting being activist in food. So yeah, so culinary school was my open introduction to not just professional cooking, but finding my place in the scene, and also looking at different ways to be creative with these ingredients.
So interesting how you talk about, indigenous foods and, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like when you're using that term indigenous foods, what you really feel like it means is the food that was before contact of, like you said, European and Spaniard nations. And so how difficult do you find it? Because, I've done a little bit of research on indigenous foods, and I think it's important for, like, just like your mentor said, I don't think there's enough spotlight on that. And you're right that there's so many cuisines that have taken a lot and not really given credit where credit is due. So how do you find that being this activist, where is those people who are fighting that fight? I know of, there's an indigenous chef, I think he calls himself the sous chef, but it's, SIOUX.
Yeah.
And I think that might be the biggest one, but where do you see other, responsibilities and activists trying to, fight that good fight, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many categories with, in the culinary perspective. There's so many, especially with indigenous food too. We call it indigenous food movement. So you have the foragers, you have the sea keepers, you have the traditional farmers, you have the people that go ricing, that go for wild rice, people that go fishing. You have the cooks and chefs like me in the kitchen. And then you have those who are following the ancestral trade routes, who are mobile or online, selling ancestral ingredients to tribal communities and non-tribal communities. So there's so many avenues that you can definitely take. But the person that you mentioned, Sean Sherman, he's also known as the sous chef. And one thing that I was gonna mention is when I started culinary school, he became my mentor in 2014. My wife and I started a Native American club on campus just to have more representation of the Native culture, on
Yeah.
campus.
It's awesome.
And and our first event was Why Treaties Matter in the Midwest. We're looking for a Native caterer who could bring indigenous appetizers beyond fried bread or Indian tacos.
Right.
My wife found Sean Sherman on Facebook. It was the same year that he started his company, the Sous Chef. And then he found out, I was a culinary student. I needed 250 plus hours of internship. And then and he found out I was a student. So it's funny because it was during the winter, the end of December, I believe, and the next day he brought me on to the first catering event, and it was across the street from the college. So right when I clocked out of school, I walked across the freeway and I went to the Minnesota Historical Society. It's one of the major museums in Minnesota, and it was I believe it was Indigenous Peoples not day, but like a Heritage Month or something in December
Okay.
that was going on due to some political reason. So, and that was my introduction to catering, and all indigenous food. So, and I came out with the term cooking in two worlds. Being on campus, working with gluten, dairy, processed sugar, all these different ingredients across the world, and
Right.
stepping off the campus to work with Sean, I have to exclude all that out of my mind. So it was interesting,
So
and
he
to
stays
this,
very pure to that
yeah, yeah,
ancestral food.
yeah. So to
That's
this day,
awesome.
he's still one of my mentors, and the blessing that he provided me when I graduated. He gave me the opportunity to continue working with him, or to branch out and start my own business and start my own catering. So and to me, I think it was a good move to actually move on and start and branch out and start my own business. Because that helps spread the awareness, right? Instead of being in a circle. Like I said, he has these different avenues. He has one concept. For me, I have a different concept. When I first started focusing on food, I did the same thing, decolonizing the diet, right? So that's one of the things that you hear so much. But after graduating from college, from culinary school, and straight hitting the ground running with Sean and all these other individuals, and traveling internationally for about 4 years nonstop from 2016 to 2020, and realizing that a lot of tribal communities are still on a third world poverty status. We can do a lot of fine dining, all that is cool, but we're missing the gap that we have to fill in, where we have our tribal communities who are still in a third world poverty status, and that need access to these type of heirloom ingredients, right?
Right.
So
For
I have
survival,
to take,
not for pleasure.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. So I have to
Right.
take a step back, and also my wife as well. We had a conversation of, where I should focus on, so, and when the pandemic hit, that's where the challenge came in for me, because traveling for 4 to 5 years internationally with Sean, and then on my own, and making a lot of connections in the indigenous food world, and coming to a halt because of the pandemic. It was hard for me because I'm a traveling chef. I'm never in one place, only if I'm home. So
Right.
being home for a couple of weeks, self quarantine, and I reached out to a friend of mine, Ben Shindu, who was the executive chef at the Gatherings Cafe inside the Minneapolis American Indian Center. I reached out to him. I told him I got tested. I'm good to go. What do you guys need help on the line? Are you guys doing on curbside pickup? Are you guys doing takeout? Any
Right.
way I can help,
Right.
And
Right.
then he was telling me that his boss, Mary Lagarde, we're looking for a group of people to start a project on feeding the community, the native community. So that was my way of starting, becoming one of the leading team members on that project. Instead of being home, instead of networking and mutual aid, I wanted to do something more with my platform. So I had a meeting with Mary Lagarde and my friend Ben Shindu on March 22nd. That was on a Sunday. And then 2 days later, Tuesday, March 24th, we opened up the kitchen. We emptied
Oh,
out the
wow.
pantry, the freezer. With the 2-week period, we emptied out the whole kitchen,
Yeah.
and then we started getting our first grant was from Blue Cross Blue Shield Minnesota. They're able to provide a couple of grand to support us for a couple of weeks. And then so we started doing about 100 to 150 meals a day for 5 days a week. So there's probably about 3 or 4 of us team members that started the project, feeding our elders. And
Yeah.
and in June, we're, our funding was going down. So we started looking at different areas
And how would
to
you
receive
say that,
grants and funds.
that 150 to 155 meals a day, do you think that satisfied the need, or did you see a greater need there? But, because of finances, because of, logistics, you guys weren't able to, push more.
No, I mean, there was definitely more. There was more of a need in the community, but with the size of the kitchen we had, and
Right.
the much we could push out daily, we were able to only stay around 250 or lower.
Yeah.
So just with what the capacity we had, we could definitely do more than that, but just with the reality of the kitchen, that's what we could afford.
Right.
So in June, our funding was getting low. And I remember 2018, Sean and I traveled to Copenhagen, to Denmark, to the Matchstick Symposium with Rene Redzepi and his team. And I met Nate Mook, the CEO of the right hand man of Jose Andreas with World Central Kitchen, and
Yeah.
I attended his workshop of of feeding the world, with the amazing work that they do, and and I had a conversation with him, and talking about third world communities and how that's connected, or how it's still seen the same level as a lot of tribal communities in the U.S.
Right.
And into South America as well. And we had a conversation. We became friends, and that's something I took away from that project. It was so many celebrity chefs, so many demos. It was just like a kid in the candy store, right? There's so many people that
Yeah.
you see.
Like, oh my God,
But
can I have your
yeah,
autograph and your
yeah,
autograph? Yeah.
yeah. But the end of the week, what the takeaway for me was Nate Mook, the work that he
Yeah.
was doing. Because to me, prior to going to Denmark, I was at Standing Rock. I was cooking for 2,500 people daily. 3 meals a day with seven female volunteers. And I was mainly the only male in the kitchen. So and that's part of smashing the patriarchy in the kitchen that I work on as well. But in 2016. 2017 with Standing Rock is where I picked up the activism and seeing it firsthand, right? So when I went to Denmark, I had that in my mind of tribal communities. How can I stay connected with the community instead of doing fine
Right.
dining? So, and when I met Nate, he opened my eyes of how to pursue that. How to set your goal and how to accomplish that. Even as a single or individual who has a platform. So he was telling me how they started that, and with the pandemic, I kind of had that reference and that knowledge. So I ended up reaching out to him because they were reaching out to a couple states, when the pandemic hit. And I asked, do you guys have resources to help us here in Minnesota? Our fundings are going down. I remember, we met in Copenhagen, we had a conversation, and
Yeah.
2 days later, they were able to reimburse their meals weekly. So that was their
Wow.
way of supporting us.
Yeah.
That's
So and
amazing.
yeah. So since June to this day, they're still helping us and covering our food costs for sure.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
I mean, that is a incredible story to take in, and I have so many questions. I didn't want to interrupt, uh,
No, feel free to interrupt. Yeah.
but no, that's amazing, and that entire journey, and just like from where you started, and just seeing how you embraced everything and pursued. I know that it's to do what you have done so far. It takes a lot of time, and it really takes a lot of time to build that. And um,
Yeah, I remember being in culinary school for 2.5 years. We had about probably 27 students. The day of the graduation, we went down to 11. And that gutted out the people who were looking at celebrity chefs on Food Network, on these different Bravo TV,
Rachel
whatever.
Ray. Yeah.
Yeah, they were looking at the big screen like, okay, I'm gonna go to culinary school, I'm gonna get my certificate, and I'm gonna be a celebrity chef. So the first couple of weeks, you started seeing people leaving left and right because they started seeing the challenge of the quick fire and being on the line, cooking breakfast, jumping to lunch, and then jumping on to dinner. And then the
Yeah.
last zone is doing fine dining. So all this stuff, was hard for them. Also, the food costs with the textbooks, right, with the math, it was starting to become a challenge, even for me. But I had to stay. For me, there's some areas that I fail and some areas I gain in the academic for culinary, but I have to stay because it's part of indigenizing spaces, part of reclaiming areas, right? So that's the way I see it as indigenous chef. Whatever kitchen I go to, I try and indigenize it, and I try and smash the patriarchy, meaning I try and bring my own staff or my own employees and having it be equal gender.
Yeah.
And just talking about that, so yeah, I mean, it's a lot of conversations that came out of this pandemic alone. Feeding right now, we're doing about 185 meals a day. Still 5 days a week.
and that's
So
incredible. That's a lot of numbers, and I want to thank you personally. And
Yeah.
that's a huge role you're taking on, and it sounds like you're crushing it. And I'm happy to hear that it's going well, and you were able to find funding and keep this project going. And I think you're doing a great deal of work. We have one viewer tuning in, and she's saying, or he's saying, such an amazing connection and opportunities you're doing for the indigenous community. So shout out to them, and shout out to you for doing what you do every day. And it I just can't imagine how much work it to organize and put that on your shoulders. And um going home, you still gonna be thinking about that, and you got the next day and the next day and the next day. And I think that's an incredible thing you're doing.
I mean, we all have one life to live, right? That's one thing I picked up, when I graduated from culinary school, and when I picked up, when I started my company, into tribal foodways, and started traveling internationally and started creating my own feeds for presentations, for demo, and then switching to virtual cooking and teaching. I started realizing that, how many areas can I touch? How many areas can I develop? Meaning 2 years ago, I started my YouTube channel, and then the next month, I'll be doing my podcast as well, just what you guys are doing, so I'm trying to pick up different areas to where I can leave a legacy, not just for my family and my kids, but for the next generation, and not just indigenous people or people of color, but just humanity in general, letting know that the next generation of culinarians, that we can smash the patriarchy in the kitchen. We can keep the gender balance in the kitchen. We can keep that balance of humanity regardless of what race you're from.
Yeah.
And when I started the culinary movement, or when I got into it, it was difficult for me. It was a lot of historical trauma that I had to backtrack, right? And for example, a quick story with Standing Rock. I remember going through the orientation, and one of the tents, it's about 20 by 20, and it was a dry pantry tent, right? And I stepped in, and I had my white chef coat on, I had my whatever it was, and I remember stepping into the tent, looking to my right, I seen the rows of Crisco and different types of generic lard coming from that commodity food program, right? And then on this side, you had rows of flour, bleached, unbleached, whatever, different types of flour. Then all in the back was just a lot of canned goods, to me, for some reason, it brought back this memory of what my Navajo ancestors went through in the 1860s, 1850s, called the Long Walk. And the only reason why a majority of my ancestors survived to the U.S. government, or surrendered to the U.S. government, was it was called the food war, right? You burn people's food, they end up surrendering. So, or the food crops were burnt, the wild games were chased off, the livestock were killed, and the homes were starting to burn. So a lot of the tribal leaders had to give in, to help save the next generation, help save the families as well. So to me, as a chef and as a cook, for some reason, that historical memory came to mind. So and I started looking at that, and it's like, okay, I'll be here for 2 weeks and a half, and I'm gonna try and serve gluten and dairy-free ingredients and healthy food. Because with the Standing Rock, with the pipeline, it wasn't just affecting the tribal community or the communities downriver. And not if, but when the pipelines do burst, not only will it affect the communities, but I was looking at our plant relatives and our animal relatives, and
Right.
and ingredients that we cultivate as well, all down the Mississippi River. So that was my way of contributing to the cause. And not just that, but one thing that we can't forget is, when we're fighting for indigenous rights, we can't forget about our indigenous food. We can definitely talk about that, but it's also what we have to intake as well. So
Yeah.
definitely walking what you're talking, right? So yeah, so Standing Rock, that was my eye opener to activism, and looking at that historical trauma of indigenous food. And then moving on today, I try and talk about the past as well. But moving forward, I try and talk about the positive of indigenous food. And talking about, there's over 560 tribes in the U.S. alone, not counting Mexico, South America, Canada, and Alaska. And these different regions, these tribes have their own corn, squash, and bean culture, and it all comes with different ceremonies when you're planting and harvesting. So to me, that is the positive vibe of helping to revitalize and bring awareness to the indigenous food culture.
Yeah. And, a couple questions we have for, here tonight. Um, obviously, bringing recognition to your culture and your ancestors is very big to you. And, I think it's something that should be more precedent, in every facet. I think a lot of, my generation and generation younger than me is very self-involved and not really worried about, culture and history and, ideas of the past, and sort of, not making the same mistakes that we've made before, and, recognizing and realizing, what who before us, what they gave up for us to be here. What would you say, is a good piece of advice for, the generations coming up to, be cognitive of that fact?
Yeah. So no, no, one thing I like to cover too as an activist is I'm part of a group called I Collective, and what we do is we cover the culinary cultural appropriation in the industry, and to me, as an open letter, as encouragement, as inspiration, what I can say is that we are all indigenous to a certain place and time, right?
Right.
And no, and there's definitely nothing wrong looking into your own food culture, and there's nothing wrong into loving and experiencing other cuisines, but there's a certain point that you would have to um, regard yourself, right? For example, having non-indigenous people representing indigenous food culture and profiting off of that, but not having actual connection to it, or actually not giving back to those food vendors or producers.
Right.
So the past years I've been calling out, a lot of celebrity chefs on that type of focus, and I've been blocked by so many people, and at the same time I never really receive any response back, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's definitely interesting. But what I would say is definitely, don't forget who you are. Don't forget where you come from. And right now, you see this trend and this fab of people talking about land acknowledgement, right? But it's just something that's always been around, but it's just starting to develop. It's starting to come
Right.
to light. So what I would say to a lot of culinary students and chefs and cooks who are watching right now, look at your surrounding. Look at where you're at. New York, LA, Texas, wherever you're at, you are on indigenous land. Look at the food culture in that area. Reach out to the tribal vendors, reach out to the tribal foragers, and support them, especially during this time. Especially if you're working in fine dining, especially if you're working in a larger scale restaurants, you have that capacity to help a farm, or to help individuals. No, definitely. Take a trail and look at your edible landscape. Look at where your food comes from.
Yeah. And so, that kind of perfectly segues into our next question. As a chef who's currently, in Florida, and we have, a very local history with the Seminole tribe, and, Vladas in Illinois. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe, that was Sioux area, Sioux country, in that Midwest region. So how, in these regions, what would you say is the best route to, connect with that, tribal vendor? If, I wanted this heirloom, wild rice, and I wanted to make sure, I was supporting this initiative, supporting this food activism, movement, where would be my steps in sourcing that product so I can put it on a menu?
Definitely. No, every city has a American Indian Center. It's kind of like a visitor center, right? And
Okay.
and that's the cafe that I work out of in Minneapolis. It's called the Minneapolis American Indian Center, and the cafe is located inside the building. So if you're interested in looking at the local cuisine, I would say I would say to visit one of the local Indian centers. And they have a lot of resources, and most of the buildings have their own food resources. I mean, they have a food sovereignty program. They have a farm program, or else they have kitchens and cafe that they work out of. But they're always looking for ally support. They're always looking for people who can come in and do like demos of different cuisines, to help and expand the world for indigenous youth, to help them bring into this type of industry.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and kind of to touch back on like what you were saying earlier, and I have this uh, every spring, right? I started getting into, once I found out that ramps grow in Chicago wild everywhere. I started to get really interested about that, and like the first season, I just didn't really do much research. Just went out to a forest preserve, and I found a couple, and then because of that, I did a little bit more research, and next season, I was kind of looking, where they would be better, and like what the terroir is for them to grow. And I think you're very right that there's still some untouched parts or forest preserves in Chicago that you'll find these ramps, but most of the commercialized land, you won't find any ramps or any wild spores. And it kind of like sucks to see that, because commercialized land gets eaten up, more and more of the forest preserves, and there needs to be that balance, right? And I think a lot of things that I heard, the year for is like this balance, this equality, this we all have to live together, and let's do it, in the most positive way. And every step of your journey that you shared, I was able to connect, with something similar that I've went through, and it's been awesome. But definitely, yeah, every season I go picking for ramps, and I do find mushrooms, and I like to forage, but there's a lot of cool stuff that when you don't have the knowledge, you kind of live life
So
not knowing
yeah.
that, kind of, and you miss out.
Yeah,
So
definitely. I mean, for Chicago, for people who are viewing, who are listening, I would say I'm not gonna say the tribe, but um I'm gonna have you look into the original name or the history, backstory of the name Chicago. It has something to do with the onion, and it circles around with the tribe in the area. So definitely check it out. It's pretty fun. All the history of Chicago, and it circles back to the onion, right? So yeah, check it out. It's pretty cool.
right, I'm a allium lover, so I'm usually that guy that's like put extra grilled onions on everything.
Right. Yeah, so we saved some rams from last season in the freezer, So and with the cafe, right, with the pandemic happening, we were looking to reopening next month. We're going to do rebranding, a new concept, but to do with the holidays and this whole new gathering, this previous events, it's just that this new surge is going to happen, right? So having a directors meeting, with the leaders in the building, we all decided to wait on that. So right now we have enough funding and grants to continue feeding the elders in the community at least for one more year, or at least for the summer. So for me, I was ready to I know this is selfish to say, but I was ready to jump into the norm of serving the community again, right? But
Right.
looking at the policies and looking at the reality, we're not even close to doing that, And to me, I know it's hard to say as a chef, but I don't think majority of the restaurants should be open right now. I mean, it's really sad to see that you have to eat outdoor, but at the same time there's a tent and you're still eating indoors, so that doesn't
Right.
make sense at all,
Right.
so it's just a lot more budget that people are getting, that are wasting, so the financial stability in America, to focus on the culinary industry alone right now is it's really crazy, so
Right.
for me and looking at the reality of it, I have to take a step back, and we have to wait on reopening the cafe. So right now we're just looking into still serving the community, but at the same time we're going to slowly do like a weekly takeout, like specials, right? So, and we're going to do like to takeout only catering, right? So we're going to do like bulk items, like for example, a pan of cedar braised bison, a pan of wild rice pilaf with parsnip or turnip, and then a side of blue corn polenta or blue corn mush, then a side of like sweetgrass tea or something, so just keeping that indigenous food, but not fully decolonizing it, because our main focus is working with the elders. So to speak on that is, a lot of our elders are still in the residential school or boarding school era. They're still in that historical trauma, meaning that the food that they were given when they're in the era when they were assimilated, they were introduced with these foreign ingredients.
Right.
That's how fry bread came about. So looking at these different areas, and I remember the first couple of weeks of serving the elders, we received feedbacks of, oh, we don't like this type of food. Oh, I know it's wild and game, but we never had it. There was a lady who, sent us an email saying that the last time she had bison was when she was a kid with her grandma. And then
Yeah.
when she received bison, she said she teared up and she ate half of the food. She saved it for the next day. So
Yeah.
just hearing the story and knowing that I cannot fully cut off, most ingredients that I would like to. So I have to do it slowly, right? So the new term that I'm using is serving healthy comfort food, and but at the same time, using a lot less dairy, using a lot less gluten, and definitely using all natural sweeteners like honey, birch syrup, maple syrup, agave.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's where I'm at with my current status with the industry right now. It's definitely sad, but the reality is something we have to look at for our own safety, our family, and for the community.
Yeah. I think that's smart to always, as chefs, sometimes we like to live in these make-believe worlds and like, well, if the situation was just this, then how can I finagle the situation to be this? So, whatever I want to do, is what I can do. But sometimes to take that hard look at reality and, make that conscious choice, it takes a little bit more effort sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably get some shit for this, but for Minnesota, the state of Minnesota, Governor Walz just passed to have the restaurants open again. I believe early this week, and that happened with a lot of celebrity and well-known chefs in the Twin Cities crying about losing their restaurants, crying about losing their platform, right?
Right.
But what they focused on was talking about their employees. But then there's articles coming out about their employees' perspective of how they're being treated. Just for example, like what came out with David Chang's article. So that's what's happening here in the Twin Cities. We
Right.
have a lot of gatekeeping celebrity chefs who are crying to the governor. And now that they open the restaurants back up, it's just going to be a whole new surge. It's just going to start over again.
Right.
So it is definitely hard, but we have to pick our own battles, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, down here in Florida, we just haven't stopped ramping up cases since the beginning. So DeSantis hasn't, I think we were closed for a total of a month and a half. And, I'm in Pinellas County, and I think we're like number 2 or second or third county in all of Florida as far as COVID cases. I think we're only topped by like Polk County and Miami-Dade County, which is like Miami and Central Florida. So it's, like you said, it hurts to say that maybe the restaurant shouldn't be open because we all know, how much that affects our friends and family. But it's definitely difficult to weigh that balance between,
Yeah.
people's livelihoods and, them being able to pay their bills. And, you have people's lives on the other hand, and them getting sick. And, it's definitely affected a good number of, our food and beverage family. I don't think, I'd say 99% of food and beverage family has been affected, unless you were already doing, to-go catering, private chefs, small events, or if you were the tent guy. If you're the tent guy, you're making out well. So before we wrap up here, Chef, is there anything that you want our viewers, our followers, the viewers that are tuning in here from your channel as well, what do you have coming down the pipeline? What are you working now? How can we get involved?
Yeah, so for people who are interested in my work and my projects, definitely you can follow me on all social media: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Yazzie the Chef, and I have a YouTube channel called Yazzie the Chef TV, and it's 3 to 5 minute video clips of easy made recipes focused on indigenous food. It's really the fundamental of cooking. And once you see the video and once you wrap your head around the recipe, from there you can add whatever ingredients you want, right? So it's more of a basic videos that I share, mainly with a lot of Native youth and a lot of elders who are interested or who want to be reintroduced to indigenous food. So those are the platforms that I represent and that I have, and the Yaz podcast is what I'm working on right now. It's on Instagram, and but besides that, it's definitely trying times right now. It's hard times, especially in tribal communities. If allied resources, you guys have the capacity to do so, reach out to the local tribal communities in your state, in your neighborhood, and find out how you can help those tribal communities. You can cook a couple meals for a family of 5 or so. You can provide a couple of coats, a couple of mittens, gloves, winter gear, whatever. Reach out to your local homeless. We have a lot of unsheltered indigenous relatives in all across the cities. Make a couple meals and pass that on. So I mean, a lot of native or not, we have a lot of unsheltered relatives who are forgotten about, especially during the winter time. So I would definitely say reach out and try to make some noise on your own. Like I said, you have one life to live. Try and pursue different avenues, and sometime you're gonna fall. I fell so many times. It's just you gotta get back up and keep trying. You learn from your
Right.
mistakes. So yeah, but besides that, it's the end of the day. We all love food. Food is, like I said, food to me is community and it's unity. And it's one thing that I love to share with people is when we're around the table and discussing food, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, no, that's
Definitely.
amazing.
Very well
And,
said.
we have one viewer asking, what's the secret to Navajo bread?
And no yeast, no sugar. So
There you go.
you're not making Midwest fry bread. You're not making bannock. Salt, water, lard, or animal fat, a little bit of salt. That's all you need for fry bread. Even tortillas. Tortillas probably a little less clabber girl, a little less baking soda. A little less baking powder. But yeah, definitely just those ingredients. But once when I talk about indigenous food, I like to share that fry bread. There's a lot of debate around that, but it originated with the Navajo tribe in the Southwest, and it just took off like a wildfire into Canada. So now here in the Midwest, you have more of the sweet bread, and they're more smaller, but the Navajo bread is more fluffier and more larger. And then if you move into Canada, you have more of the sweet rolls, you have more of the bannock, right? So there's that transition of bread, but then they also focus on the fusion cultures in those areas. So
Yeah.
we have a lot of Hmong community, Norwegian, Ethiopian, all those communities here in the Midwest. So having those different influences, and then same thing with Canada as well, how bannock was created.
Awesome. And just for my personal question, what are your 5 favorite indigenous ingredients to work with, or what's that ingredient that kind of can be
Yeah,
used
I would say
in
red
everything?
chili. Okay, red chili, salmon, wild rice, um, definitely temporary beans from Ramona Farms on the Gila River Reservation, South Phoenix, Arizona. They have their own variety of temporary beans. You won't find it anywhere else in the world, just within that
Wow.
area in the Southwest. They have black, white, and brown beans. It's my favorite, and I would say blue corn, Navajo blue corn.
Okay.
So for blue corn, it's a full circle of life. For an infant becoming a toddler, you're going from liquid to solid diets, and then from an elder returning to the spirit world or heaven, you're going from solid diet to liquid diet. So with the Navajo blue corn, it's one of our big ceremony food for Navajo culture. Just like I explained, it's a full circle for us. So I think that was my introduction to food, was focusing on corn.
Gotcha.
No, that's amazing, and definitely have to get my caliper of indigenous cooking. I can't say I've had it or really I've heard about it, but I've never really had to experience it myself or try
Sounds like
anything
we need to
that's
go
really
see the
authentic.
native center and get some of this ingredients rocking in our kitchen spot.
100%.
Yeah, and like you said, you just mentioned the sous chef Sean, right? They're opening their first restaurant in Minnesota downtown, and I believe mid-May, I believe. So they're opening their first full decolonized indigenous restaurant in North America. So
That's
that'll be
awesome.
pretty cool to see as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. We'll
Will do.
definitely have to check all that out. Definitely be checking out your YouTube channel.
Soon coming up podcast as well. That'll be
and
exciting.
the podcast. That's going to be
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, and just to give you guys a heads up, my first guest for the podcast will be Aaron Yazzie, who was one of the main NASA leaders who helped create the tools to set up the spaceship up, right? So he'll be my first guest, and I'm looking forward to that.
That's
That's
awesome.
awesome.
No, it sounds incredible. You're doing a lot of things, and we appreciate the workload that you're putting on yourself, and all the goals that you're trying to reach. And we're rooting for you here at Late Night with Chefs. And I think you shared an incredible story, and you're doing great causes, and it's awesome to hear that there's chefs out there that are not focused on the money and the fame and living in this unrealistic world. And you talk very humble, and you do a lot of great things, and we really appreciate that. And that's awesome that we got to have you on this podcast and hear your experience and your journey. And I hope that people can take this as a really good positive example that you can be in a troubled kid in a bad environment, and you can go and end up helping thousands of people and changing thousands of lives. And I do believe in second chances, because I got to have one myself. So I personally felt that experience that you went through, and we're doing great things, and that's awesome to see.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you guys the time to to help me to share space with you guys, and to help share a perspective and a narrative that America definitely needs to hear.
Definitely.
That's awesome.
Well, Chef, before you go, we started this new question that we're trying to get some, just some top of the head answers. And, one of the things that's been mind boggling us is why 86?
Why 86?
Yeah. Why 86?
Well, it depends, what from what perspective, like from.
Well,
Yeah,
when you're in a restaurant and you just 86 this menu item off the board, why was the number 86 chosen?
You know what? I don't even know that. You know what? To be honest with you, I don't even know, because the only thing I can tell you that might be the right answer is that's the year I was born.
There you go. That's a good answer. That's a good answer.
For real, I don't know. I got to look into that for sure. That's a great question.
Yeah,
we would definitely use that. We use that in the kitchen today. Yeah,
we
just
do.
Use
Yeah,
that in the kitchen because we ran out of red beets.
We just say it. We say it every day. But why?
Why do we say it? That's the crazy thing that no matter
everyone says it.
No matter which kitchen you work at, or that, we all experience the same more or less experiences, and it forms this perspective that everybody has, and I think it's positive, and we enjoy what we do, and we enjoy cooking, and it really shows by our personality. And but that's really crazy how things spread like that. And
why
it takes on.
We just yell it. We got no idea why we're screaming this at the top of our lungs, but here we are.
Yeah, that's definitely a good question. I got to look into that.
All right, Chef. Well, thank you so much for coming on tonight. We really appreciate your perspective. Very interesting. Definitely one of a kind. Definitely a lot of good words shared on what we all can be doing better to pay homage to respect where respect is due. And appreciate you. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for tuning in to another awesome episode of Late Night with Chefs. We have episodes scheduled for the next 5 weeks. Me and Vlad are on a roll here now, so we appreciate all of your guys' support. It has definitely been an up and downhill battle, and thanks to all of you guys for keeping us motivated, keeping us going, and it's been an awesome journey so far, and can't wait to see where we head.
Yeah, I want to say thank you, Chef Yazzie, for coming on the pod, and I want to thank all our viewers for coming on and tuning in. I want to make sure you guys get all our latest notifications and stuff like that, so make sure to follow, like, and subscribe. We do have some gear that I have posted in the back, so make sure to check that out. And we are trying to support this industry, as best as we can, and that's the reason we got in here. And I thought this was an amazing podcast, and we got to meet another wonderful chef. So thank you so much to all our viewers, and thank you, Chef Yazzie, for coming on. As always,
thank you, Chef Yazzie.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for being the connectors and the conduits between the foodies and the chefs, and that's being real talk, because if it wasn't for you guys in the middle, you guys, they want to be hearing this type of story, so I thank you guys for definitely doing that.
Awesome. And
Thank
we
you.
appreciate that.
Stay safe, everybody.
Have a good night.
Wear your mask.